removed, and a special bench was placed there, and that is where Tom Hanks sat on the park bench telling his story as far as gone. Once the filming was complete, the bench was removed, the area was re-landscaped, and the bench has been donated to the city of Savannah, and they display it inside their history museum that's located back in the visitor center from where we just left. On the corner here is the First Baptist Church of Savannah. It's the oldest Baptist church in Georgia. It was established about 1800. In 1864, General William T. Sherman of the Union Army occupied the city of Savannah during the Civil War. And during the occupation, most churches disbanded. The Baptists did not. They continued to worship on a weekly basis, and they invited the Union soldiers, who were the enemy, to come worship with them on Sunday or today. Now, I did mention Oglethorpe was the idealist when it came to the New World. He didn't permit slavery, Catholics, lawyers, or whiskey, rum, or strong drink. There's your COVID resource unit right there. Oglethorpe thought that Catholics might be loyal to the Spanish in Florida if there was a conflict, and he didn't like the way lawyers treated the downtrodden in Old England, and he hoped everyone would represent themselves. And if you look into the square, you see the chances, but it was filmed in Savannah. One key scene was filmed here in front of the Sixpence Pub. And that scene, Dennis Quaid had told Julia Roberts he'd be working late at night, and at 11 o'clock he had not arrived home yet. She was already suspicious, but she hopped in the car in her nightgown and she guarded below. According to the legend, it is Mrs. Sorrell's spirit that haunts this mansion today, as she seeks to find Mr. Sorrell to torment him for that transgression. It is a museum, and they do give tours there for a fee. And we have one picture of the flag of the colonists, and Sergeant Jasper tried to rescue the flag and get it back. He was mortally wounded, and the statue there in the square honors him for his efforts. And of course, you see there he's holding the flag in the statue. Now we're going back to the Civil War. This house on the corner is the Green Melver mansion. And Charles Green was a wealthy cotton factor when the Civil War began, and this was where he lived. In 1864, General Sherman was headed this way. Sherman had come to Atlanta with his army, and he had 60,000 men in that army, and they burned Atlanta almost to the ground. And they were burning everything. Now we're crossing Jones Street. Southern Living magazine is named Jones Street as the most beautiful street in America. And you can look at both directions to tell that it is a very attractive street. I have been told the expression, keeping up with the Joneses, originated in Savannah because people wanted to live like people live on Jones Street. And I suppose that could be the truth. Who knows? Had to start somewhere. Now we come to Monterey Square, that statue in Monterey Square, honors Count Casimir Pulaski, who was from Poland. Now Pulaski arrived in America before the Revolutionary War began. He was in disfavor with the Polish government when he came. When he got to America, he got to know Benjamin Franklin. And when the war broke out, Ben Franklin recommended Pulaski to George Washington as someone that ought to be in our army, and so Washington made that happen. Pulaski fought alongside the colonists and taught them to fight from horseback, something they did not do previously. He's known as the father of the American cavalry. But Pulaski, unfortunately, mortally wounded in the siege of Savannah, as well, and he is buried beneath the statue in Monterey Square. So now we're going back to the movies. Who saw the movie, Midnight to Garden of Good and Evil, or read the book? Anybody see that movie? Okay, those of you who didn't see it, you have an assignment. When you get home, you got to download it and watch it. Okay? The movie was filmed mainly in this house to your right here. That's Miss Riles. And before trial, acquitted Jim. He spent more than $1 million defending himself and returned to live in his mansion after his acquittal. And 6 months later, in that same room where he killed Danny, Jim died of a heart attack. Excellent movie, stars Kevin Spacey, John Cusack, directed by Clint Eastwood. Now across the square there, you'll see the Temple of Memphis, Israel, completed in 1875. It houses the third oldest Jewish congregation in America. That congregation was established on July the 11th of 1733, just a few months after Buckingham Palace. Now the Armstrongs willed their house to be used as a junior college when they passed on, and the college operated there for many years, but eventually it moved to new quarters on the city's south side, and the house changed hands quite a few times. Eventually, that house was purchased by Richard Kessler. Now, Kessler is a hotel developer that has 2 5-star hotels here in Savannah and hotels all throughout America, part of the Marriott Autograph Collection. Kessler renovated the home inside out, made it into his private residence, And Kessler is an avid art collector. He brought all the artwork you see in the courtyards, and you can see some of it through the windows there. I wish she could complete it. The building was completed by her sister, Mary Telfair, and she named it for her brother-in-law, and specified it must always be a museum, and today it houses the Georgia Historical Society's History Museum. Victorian-style homes were built on the right as we go to history. On the right, and the other eye, looking to the part to the left there. That is the fountain I just showed to you. There's nothing special about that fountain. It was ordered from a St. Patrick's Day. The Irish were not awarded the fountain green, an annual tradition known as the green fountain. Now the Victorian-style homes on the right were in very bad repair. Back in the 1960s and 70s, many of them were boarded up, and some of them sold for as little as $20,000. Prevailing thought they'd be torn down and constantly built here, but quite obviously that never happened. Today, most of its single family was not a bit in the army and decided they ought to be in Europe fighting for the Allies, but they had a bit of a problem. They had no warplanes with which to fight. They flew commercially to Europe, and by the end of World War II, they established the 98th Air Force, the largest and most powerful Air Force on Earth. At that time, and there's a National Museum to the 98 out on Interstate 95, about 8 miles out of town, in nearby a large family fortune. In her day, if a woman had assets and married, the husband would be placed in charge of the wife's assets and would tell the wife what to do. Mary Telfair said no man would tell her what to do, particularly with her own money. And as a result, she never married. Being unmarried, she had no heirs. She was the last survivor of the Telfairs around Savannah. With no heirs to leave her money to, she ended up giving away most of the family fortune, building hospitals and museums, and participating in many other public projects, and she actually did a world of good. Now we're turning on to Gwinnett Street now. Gwinnett Street is the southern boundary of the historic district, so we're re-entering our district. To your left, the mansion on Forsyth. That's a hotel belonging to Richard Kessler, and he named it for his brother Warren Kessler, who lived in Savannah. Now, is anyone familiar with Asa Candler on board? Anybody ever heard of him? Asa Candler started a little corporation up in around the early 1900s. He still owned it outright when he was down at the hospital. This company is called Ruskin Hall. There it is. Give a look at it. And it is another example of how SCAD uses historical buildings for good purposes today. In the parking lot, this oak tree is called the Canmore Oak. It's over 300 years old. The circumference of the trunk exceeds 16 feet, and the canopy covers more than 100 feet. Once the hospital moved out, a developer wanted to buy the hospital building and to convert it to condominiums. If you look over here to your left, that's the Temple Neck Visual, completed in 1875. We saw it across the square earlier. It is Gothic-style architecture. That's the only Gothic-style synagogue in North America. To the left, the Western Monumental United Methodist Church, completed in the 1870s. It was named for John and Charles Wesley. They were brothers who came from England when Oldport was here. John Wesley headed the Anglican Church, the nation's vice president. Whenever there's a tie vote in the Senate D.C., the tie vote is broken by the vice president who cast a tie-breaking vote. And John Calhoun broke 31 ties while he was vice president. There's a record. This still stands. His name popped up in the news about a month ago. There was a statue honoring John Calhoun in Charleston. City Council removed that statue ahead of some anticipated protests. He was a very strong supporter of slavery. To the right, Claire's Cafe. It's been there over 100 years. It was featured in the movie Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I told you it was directed by Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood was in Savannah. He had breakfast at Claire's every morning, and that created a stir amongst the locals as everyone crowded around to get to see Clint Eastwood as he came and went for breakfast. This is Jones Street, the most beautiful street in America, according to Southern Living magazine. Ahead of us, we come to Lafayette Square, named for the Marquis de Lafayette, who came from France during the Revolutionary War. When he arrived in America, the Marquis de Lafayette became an ally of the colonists, and he fought right along beside them as they were fighting on way for compliance. Local people used to come to Lafayette Square and just wait for darkness so they could see the Hamiltons switch on the light. It's a big deal in those days. And the Hamiltons did own the first commercial generating station in Savannah. The Cathedral of St. John the Baptist was completed in the 1870s. The original cathedral was almost totally destroyed by fire right after it was opened. The differences by dueling. They started back to back, took 10 paces, turned around, and shot at one another. Realized somebody had to decide this was a good idea. I don't understand why. Bud Gwinnett was one of the 3 Georgians who signed the Declaration of Independence. He was one of Georgia's earliest colonial governors, and he lost his life in a duel in those dueling grounds with his political rival, Lachlan McIntosh. If there's any good news about losing the duel, the good news might be you didn't have far to go to spend eternity. The cemetery was next door. It's believed about 8,000 people are buried in that cemetery. The exact number is unknown. The cemetery used to be much larger. In fact, we're driving over part of it right now. Back in some days past, they didn't revere cemeteries the way they are looked after today. 3 p.m. and menu service all day long, and we do recommend the Pirate's House to you. It's a very fine place to eat. We do recommend reservations. I don't come here anymore without a reservation. I have been here in the past before I would get a reservation and would find that the wait could well exceed an hour. And that's the same thing as telling me to come back another time. I don't wait an hour to eat. Stop number 7 on our tour at the Pirate's House Restaurant. All this over here at the Pirate's House Restaurant. And as I said, it's a very fine restaurant. This building with the green shutters is called the Herb House. Now, when Overcourt came to Savannah, he planted what he called trustees' gardens on his garden area, very colorful. In our historic district, you're not allowed to paint, to renovate, to build new, or to alter a building's exterior in any way anymore unless you have prior approval from the Historic Review Panel. And they don't approve it if it's not authentic, and they're much more stringent today than ever. On the right, we're about to see a home that has black trim, there's black shutters, and black porch railing. That house was built, completed in 1888. There's the house there. And you can see that here on the old shaped marker on the corner of the building. The spring-colored house completed in 1798. Your marker is right there. 1821, 1806. In our historic district, if a building is historical and they can determine its construction date, they plan to see a woman's ankle before marriage. And to keep the dirty old men from trying to sneak a peek, there was a separate stairway to the men and the women. I wonder what those folks would think today at some of the fashions we see walking around on our streets. The Kehoe House, it was built in the late 1800s. It's a bed and breakfast. Now the trim on that house is not wood, it's all made of cast iron. Mr. Kehoe owned a foundry in Savannah. He boasted he could build anything from iron that could be built from wood. So when he built his house, he proved it by doing it. Now Joe Namath, the former NFL quarterback, bought the house one time. He intended to put a gentleman's club there. You want to guess how that went over with historic preservationists? And the town would not submit at all. He was never ever able to get a permit. Sold the house and left town without a bright square. There's a bronze plaque on it that commemorates Tamachichi's life, giving him his proper respect. Now, there's a little bit of a side story about the boulder. The company that acquired that boulder in Stone Mountain wanted to donate it, but now they refused to accept the donation, so we must pay. Thanks for touring with us. Hope you have a great rest of your day, dear.
Thank you.
Enjoy yourself. Hi there.
Hello.
Come aboard. What you got there?
I guess we can look at it.
What?
We can look at it. It's a cafe, so you can probably look
That
at it.
might be better than what we're sick
Huh?
because they have food. That's what we're trying to say. Buyers can't because they have food.
Or we can look at the cookies, not get one, and then go and we'll be there. So we can always look at the cookies and not necessarily get one. green. There are all kinds of different colored pecans. Bad place to come when we're trying to be healthy, right? Taffies and different taffies. It's a pub, but it was weird licensing. I don't know. I think they're open, but this is all still JW Marriott, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's this whole existence, so I'm not quite sure which. Looks like the shoes were delivered. No, it says by the mailbox that we saw. So we take a left here. Actually, it'll probably pull us in closer to our place.
Have a beer here? Yeah, it's too.
Nice little hole in the wall pub.
Our view from our
Chairs there.
cruise. Chewing away.
Here.
Celebrating.
Cheers.
There's a place to eat, maybe. It looked like a place to eat. It's an inside place. We'll probably put it on there. Okay. This would be better when